For all updates on CAT Prep, please subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon.
Hi, welcome to Bodhi Prep, and here you have a passage. This is a passage reading exercise, and the passage length and the type of passage, the subject matter that you have here is very similar to the one that you might come across in the CAT exam. So we'll read the passage, and while reading, we will try to summarize every paragraph because many students say that should they write the summary on a piece of paper. I always tell them that this could be time consuming. You might start doing this, but then gradually you should try to summarize every paragraph in your mind. Don't try to write because that might take some time, some more time. So we'll try to summarize every paragraph, and this exercise will also help you in doing well in paragraph summary questions. So let's look at the passage, and as we read the passage, we will try to summarize every paragraph, and finally, we will try to understand the author's tone and attitude. What exactly is he trying to say? And thus come to the central idea of the passage, right? So here we have the first paragraph. It tells, everywhere we turn these days, we hear that colleges are not teaching critical thinking. Employers want critical thinkers, but they cannot find them. Entire books conclude that colleges have failed to increase students' critical thinking. Advocates of critical thinking contrast thinking critically with learning knowledge. College professors, they proclaim, teach facts, dates, formulae that students don't need and won't use. Instead, students need to have intellectual and cognitive skills. Often, advocates of critical thinking portray it as an independent set of cognitive skills that are easily transferable. So, now what is the first paragraph telling you? That everywhere everyone talks about critical thinking. Everyone wants critical thinking in the people that they are working with, either in the college or in the industry. This is what has come in the first paragraph. So, and towards the end, people say that yes, critical thinking is independent of cognitive skills and so on and so forth. Not much is there in the first paragraph, except that critical thinking as a concept has been introduced, and everyone desires it, or critical thinking is a desirable trait, right? A desirable quality. That is what you have in the first paragraph. So let's go and check the second paragraph. We might come across something much more profound. At a more profound level, critical thinking can be seen as a disciplined activity on its own terms. Indeed, one might understand it as a revival of trivium of grammar, rhetoric, logic, the original liberal arts. The term arts means technique or techniques to analyze text and problems. In this sense, critical thinking can be understood as a deep activity, one that requires the development of new habits of mind. It cannot come without extensive study and practice. The skills that we apply to problem and texts, the capacity to understand arguments, to make sense of their strengths and weaknesses, and to offer new and creative solutions, is gained by years of study. Even this more profound understanding of critical thinking cannot be separated from learning subject matter in the arts and sciences. So the author says, and he makes a very, very important statement. He says critical thinking cannot be separated from learning subject matter. That means critical thinking and learning subject matter go hand in hand, right? So here, the author tells what critical thinking is all about. It is all about understanding problems. So he says critical thinking can be understood as a deep activity, one that requires the development of new habits of mind. It cannot come without extensive study and practice. This is what he says. And we apply that skills to problems and texts. So, what do you get from the second paragraph? How does critical thinking arrive to us, or how do we develop critical thinking? Of course, it's a kind of studying texts, understanding arguments, something with which you might be familiar, because most of you are CAT aspirants, and you know that critical thinking is not tested in quant or in LRDI, but it is tested in VARC. So it has to do something with text and problems. But what is the author adding towards the end? That critical thinking cannot be separated from learning subject matter. This is a very, very important idea. So, in this paragraph, the author tells what critical thinking is and how it can be cultivated and how it is acquired. Correct? When students graduating from Harvard College and ninth graders at Cambridge Range were asked about the seasons, they demonstrated amazing levels of critical thinking. But they did not have the background knowledge to get the correct answer. Many believed that the seasons were caused by the Earth's orbit. Some offered complicated responses that exhibited their critical thinking and creativity, but they were wrong. If they had remembered that the seasons had to do with the Earth's tilted axis, they could have reasoned themselves to the correct answer. We can only think critically about things things about which we have knowledge. So again, this is where the connection becomes very important. Understand this. The author in the last paragraph says that critical thinking cannot be separated from learning subject matter. And here he demonstrates that with the help of an example. He says, and he gives example to us from a college. He says that we asked people question about the seasons. Everyone was good. They were giving some sort of creative answer, this answer, that answer, but they all were wrong, the author says. Why? Because they did not have the knowledge. So if you have knowledge, only then you can exhibit or use critical thinking. So the author says if they had remembered that the seasons had to do with the Earth's tilted axis, they could have reasoned themselves to the correct answer. So the author is making a statement here, and he demonstrates an example of that. That without having the subject matter with you, you cannot display critical thinking. One has to know things to answer things. This is true even in the age of Google. If one looks up something online, one needs to know a lot of background information to make sense of the definition and exam and explanation. Now, this is very much relevant to your own CAT VRC preparation. If you come across a passage about which you don't have any prior information, that passage is going to be very difficult. On the other hand, if you have some information about that passage before, that passage might become very easy. So he says that even if you come across something on Google, you need to have prior information. But most surprising, those with more knowledge can learn more when they look something up on Google. That's because if they already have background knowledge, they can add to it the new information and insights from what they're learning. Someone who understands political science and has some knowledge of how parties function will learn more than an online news story about elections than someone lacking that knowledge. So, again, a perfect example. So here he says that yes, you need to have. Here he gives an example that if you had that earlier knowledge, you could have come with the right answer. Here he gives example of Google, that even if you're googling something, you must have prior knowledge to understand that thing on Google. At the heart of critical thinking, therefore, must be a resolute rejection of critical thinking in the favor of enabling students to study and to master bodies of knowledge within which they can think critically. The author says if we emphasize generic skills, understand this is a very, very important statement. If we emphasize generic skills over learning specific subject matter, we will graduate worse critical thinkers. That means what? That means the author says that don't emphasize generic skills, emphasize learning specific subject matter. And this learning specific subject matter will make you a better critical thinker. So again, the same thing. What you see here is the author is maintaining a chain of discussion. In the first paragraph, he says what is critical thinking. Then he says that critical thinking is basically having some sort of subject matter, and it is learning subject matter by which you can develop critical thinking. Then he gives his example of this the seasons. He says that people could not give the answer. Why? Because they did not have the prior knowledge about that Earth's tilted axis. And that's why many of them, though they were brilliant and had lots of creativity in them, could not come up with the right answer. So again, he goes on to give the example of Google, that even on Google, if you search for something, you need to have prior information to make sense of what you come across in the search results. And finally, he says that you should not emphasize generic skills over learning specific subject matter. Otherwise, you will become worse. That means, what is the central idea of the passage? What is the author's broader message? That to develop critical thinking, you should not focus on generic skills. Rather, you should focus on developing content and knowledge which you can use to think critically. This is what the central idea is. Now you can go ahead and take all the questions, and you will be in a better position to answer most of the questions. Why? Because you have read in the right way. Thanks a lot. If you have liked this exercise, please subscribe to our channel.